Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, right here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney hanging out with you. Week 1 in the books, so it's time to turn the page and talk a lot of hockey here on this show. Jokes aside, I'm in one of those moods. I joined Jake Seeley earlier on All in Football, Betts TV. My earpiece just kind of went out, so I'm rocking the headset and the Birds hat. Not going to be a straight homer here today, but there's reasons to be optimistic, I suppose. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, we're not going to talk a whole lot about the Eagles today. We are going to recap everything from Week 1. Take a look at touches, targets leaders, take a look at waiver wire rankings at the running back position, the wide receiver position. We have Joe Metz of FTN. He's going to stop by. He already has a waiver wire target article up at ftnfantasy.com for you to check out and see who he is feeling. I got 10 guys at wide receiver, 10 guys at running back. I think I could have gone about 15 deep at the wide receiver position. But I got my top 10. We'll get Joe in here and get his thoughts and see who he's feeling. We can rip apart the rankings. We can have some fun with it. It really is all about context. If you have any questions, waiver wire questions, please don't be afraid to reach out at Chris Meaney if you're following along on the Twitter account here. I'll keep an eye on things. We got producer Tino here with us as well to keep an eye on things. And then you could watch this video on our YouTube page, and I'll circle back before waivers do run if you do indeed have any questions. We'll also preview tonight's Monday Night Football game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Baltimore Ravens. The Raiders getting their true home opener here tonight. Now, last year, of course, they played in Las Vegas, but there were no fans there. There were no fans, and they had that upset victory against the Saints last year in their first home game. Just saying, I may or may not be on them. I may or may not be on them. I'm on them. I'm on them. At least to cover. We talked about it a couple weeks ago that I like the 5.5, taking the points. Today I'm seeing 4.5 in some spots. We'll talk about that and some props. Props were okay yesterday. We won a few units over at FTNBets.com. The picks, though, were not great. I thought the Packers were going to win that game. They were never in it. They looked awful. Minnesota, I thought, was going to win that game against the Bengals. No chance. They came back late. They probably gave it up, right? There were a couple moments in that game. I thought that the Justin Jefferson touchdown, I thought that should have counted. And, Dalvin Cook had a bit of an issue towards the end of the game. I thought, he should have gotten in as well. But credit to the Bengals to get up in that game, give the lead away, and then find a way to win it in overtime. There's a lot of takeaways from yesterday. There were a lot of just dud performances from teams that I think we expected better from. Green Bay is one of them. We can give some credit to the Saints defense. We'll talk to Metz about the Packers and see what his takeaways are. That's probably the outlier game. Tennessee laying an egg, right? We thought shootout. I thought shootout. Geez, I was on the over 51.5, and we got 51 points. I mean, Tannehill and the Titans offense did absolutely nothing in that game, but credit Arizona. They dominated the line of scrimmage. Chandler Jones had 5 sacks, 3 in the first quarter. Maybe just some growing pains with the new offense with Arthur Smith leaving. Titans were a top 10 offense in each of the past 2 seasons. They run the play action better than anybody in the league, and they just really didn't do it well at all yesterday. And, Tannehill just looked out of sync with Julio Jones. I thought Julio looked a little sluggish. He dropped a couple passes. They definitely weren't on the same page, and just not a lot of time for those two to get in sync. And I think that may be one of my biggest takeaways in general from Week 1. Only 3 preseason games, and most starters didn't play in that third, and just coaches, not wanting to trot out their best players because they wanted to keep them fresh. So Week 1 is always the most grueling week. You hear it from former players and current players in the week that, from front to finish, they just don't play that often in the preseason. So there were, a few injuries, unfortunately, and we can start there in this show before we bring in Joe Metz, and we'll talk waiver wires, and then later on, I will just run through, some takeaways that I had from the week in terms of just touches and targets, and if, we can continue to see this kind of usage from certain players or if it was just a one-off. But all we really had to go by was last season. We can speculate a little bit on how teams' offenses were going to run, and something I did over at ftnfantasy.com with just 5 things that I was looking at. And one of those things were just new coaches and new offensive coordinators. There were a lot around the league, first-time coaches, first-time OC, first-time offensive coordinators in new roles, and it's going to take some time to get a feel of really what they're feeling. But I think we have a bit of a head start here. At least we can put them under the microscope and see exactly how their offenses ran early on, and we'll address that throughout the show, but also towards the end of the show. So the big injuries, of course, Jerry Judy. Unfortunately, man, that was really tough to watch. Oh, I couldn't watch it. I saw it live, and then that was it. I couldn't watch it again. I just it actually bothers me right now as I don't want to call myself a former athlete. I mean, I still play a little pickup here and there, but I rolled my ankle and tore ligaments in it back in the day, and it's not a good feeling. X-rays were negative, but he's going to miss some time, and he looked good. And I think a lot of us were on Jerry Judy to have a very solid season, and Teddy Bridgewater looked good as well. It's a very accurate quarterback. We got that game right. The under was there wasn't a lot of offense to be had, but Judy is he's going to miss a few weeks. So we'll talk about Tim Patrick. We'll talk about KJ Hamler. We'll talk about that offense in just a little bit. But the pickup for me is Tim Patrick. I mean, he proved last year when he filled in for Cortland Sutton that he could be valuable inside this offense. And we have a more accurate passer in Teddy Bridgewater as opposed to Drew Lock last season. So he is one of my, I think he is my top waiver wire pickup. Now, there's a couple wide receivers that I like more than him that are owned in fewer than 50% of leagues that just should be owned, like a Darnell Mooney, a Sterling Shepard. Like these guys should be rostered. There's no reason that they should be on the waiver wire. But every league is different. You could be playing in shallow leagues. So those two would be my immediate pickups. But in deeper formats, Tim Patrick is most likely available in a lot of spots. Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to miss several weeks, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. We don't have the official timeline just yet, but a hip injury that does need a surgery. I wonder if this is it for Fitzpatrick, who started for Washington last night, his ninth team that he has started for, and if I don't think he threw a touchdown pass. If he did, it would have been an NFL record, the most touchdown passes for different teams. I think Jared McCown was up there as well, who had 8. But Fitzpatrick is going to miss some time here, and like I said, I wonder if this is it for Fitzpatrick. He's a little bit older. We'll see. Hopefully, he can recover here. Tyler Henneke came in yesterday, and he, 11 for 15, not bad, 122 yards, had a touchdown. Terry McLaurin and Logan Thomas were very quiet to start the game yesterday. I was wondering where they were, and Heineke came in and I don't know. He at least leaned on the weapons. Logan Thomas found the end zone. He had a touchdown and 4 catches on 4 targets for 62 yards for Terry McLaurin. I wonder if they bring somebody in. I think they kind of have to, don't they? Cam Newton's hanging out there. Ron Rivera is very familiar with Cam Newton. Could Newton be an option for this offense? I think he may be. I know that they signed Fitzpatrick to bring him in, and they didn't really address the quarterback position in the draft, and over the past 2 years that they haven't. I think we could see a quarterback move, just bring somebody in and maybe fight for competition here. Raheem Mostart, my goodness, man, how frustrating was that yesterday? And my bad, telling people to jump in on the over 15.5 carries, the over on 65 rushing yards when we found out that Trey Sermon was just going to be a healthy, inactive scratch. It may have been the right play. I would do it again. I would give the same advice again. He suffered an injury. Now, should we know that Raheem Mostart is, quote unquote, made of glass? Like that's taking shots at the guy, and I feel bad actually doing it. But he is a guy that has suffered a lot of injuries over the past couple of years, and that's why I think we need to have Elijah Mitchell on our radar. Even Trey Sermon is a potential buy low candidate if Mostart misses some time here, and then maybe we'll see Sermon get in and be active and steal some touches. We'll talk about Shanahan and what he has done in the past with all the running backs there, but we don't have official timeline here for Raheem Mostart. He is dealing with a knee injury. But my apologies for telling everybody. I was already on him anyways from a DFS standpoint, and then when the Sermon thing happened, I came off of him a little bit, which saved me in some of my lineups. But overall, I just lost a few units, just really hammering Mostart bets because it was a good matchup, and Mitchell was good in that matchup. Right, over 100 yards for a rookie running back who we really didn't hear a whole lot from in training camp or throughout preseason. They just took advantage he took advantage of his soft lines defense, which I thought Mostart would have done as well. And also a big takeaway from that game is Brendan Ayuk. Brendan Ayuk, I talked to Jake about this morning, All in Football, Bets Media, Bets TV. You can go check that out. He had a different take than me. I didn't think that there was anything really to be concerned about. I thought, he was dealing with a hamstring issue and they were playing Detroit. Maybe they're just scaling it back. But some reports, from Matt Mayakoso, and I think I have that right, of NBC Sports. I probably butchered it. My bad, Matty. But he says that Ayuk trailed off dramatically leading up to week 1, and that he's, quote, still learning to be a pro. Trent Sherfield played over him. We've talked about Sherfield before on the show. I think, his role is growing. They like him. He was a big standout in the preseason, and Trey Lance went his way in the red zone and he caught a touchdown pass. I still think Ayuk is the guy there. I think, you buy low on Brendan Ayuk, but Deebo Samuel certainly is very much ahead of him in the depth chart. And then one more injury, Marshawn Lattimore, a couple weeks here dealing with a thumb injury. He's going to undergo surgery, and he's going to miss some time for the Saints. But, man, there was a lot of exciting things yesterday, too. I know I talked off the top about offenses like Green Bay and maybe Buffalo and Tennessee, laying an egg. But how about the three rookie wide receivers, How about the three rookie wideouts, the top 3 in the draft, and Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith? These guys catching touchdown passes from their former quarterbacks right off the hop in week 1. That was really fun to see. Let's break it all down. We'll bring in Joe Metz here of FTN. We'll talk about the waiver wire, who he's feeling, and some of his big takeaways from week 1 as well. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you, bringing in Joe Metz of FTN. J Metz 34 already has a waiver wire target article up early at ftnfantasy.com for you to check out. Joe, welcome in, bud. How's it going?
Good. It's always a pleasure to be on. Recovering from that Packers beatdown yesterday, but after the Bucks won the finals, I don't know how much I'm allowed to complain.
It's fair, yeah. You're one of those
Yeah.
multi-sport guys too, and once you get one championship, it's like, yeah, well, whatever. We'll go through the ups and the downs. What happened in that Packers game? That was
No,
one of the
so
most surprising games for me.
there's a couple theories floating around. I think some are BS. Like, someone made a joke that the Packers saw Tampa lost to New Orleans in similar fashion last year, went on to win the Super Bowl after that Week 1 loss. So I doubt that. I just think they let their guard down. Like, it's you see it in sports when a team waltzes into a game. No Michael Thomas, no Traquan Smith, new quarterback. You're like, you know what, Marshawn Lattimore's banged up. We don't have to try it hard, and they just get shell shocked. And I think that's kind of what happened. And I think this is a game to completely write off and just disregard.
Yeah, I agree. It's an outlier game. Plus, the Saints are pretty good. Like
Yeah, they're not
on
as bad as we
defense,
thought.
yeah, they're. I thought originally that the Packers, like my initial take was that the Packers were just going to crush them. And then when we got closer to game time, I was a little uneasy, but I still thought Green Bay was going to win that game. And just like with the lack of weapons on offense, but Jameis, he balled out and in a limited role in terms of throwing the football, 5 touchdowns,
Yeah,
0 picks, and the defense played pretty good. But I think you're right. Maybe the Packers took them lightly with all the injuries up front for the Saints, and then playing in Jacksonville, like not a true home game. They thought it was just going to be a walk in the
yeah.
park. But Roger said it after. It's just one game, and they're going to be there. And I think I know your answer. But out of these 4 teams, and Jake asked me this question this morning on his show, All in Football. He said the 4 teams that kind of laid an egg that we expected things from, like Green Bay, Buffalo, Tennessee. I
Yeah.
forget the 4th that he was mentioning, but is there any concerns like with those 3 teams that just really didn't show up on offense?
I I'm not going to say these were fluky losses, but I'm not worried about any of those 3 teams. I'm still very confident, and they're all high-powered offenses. I would throw Minnesota in there too.
Mm,
I think that's another team where they just kind of came and stumbled out of the gate, and they'll just get back to it on week 2. I think the 3 that you mentioned are teams that could come out and just absolutely dominate week 2.
yeah, I agree. I think a lot of buy low candidates. I mean, you're not going to be able to get
Yeah,
Devontae Adams, and I don't think you should be buying Rodgers. You have him, you have him. It's fine. You don't
yeah,
sell him. It's just the quarterback position. But like Julio Jones, AJ Brown, people just overreact.
yeah.
It's just the nature of the business, right? It's kind of why we have jobs, I think, and why people are asking us these questions. Like, they just overreact on certain things. So let's talk about the running backs here. We'll get into wide receivers, and maybe we can wrap up with any quarterbacks or tight ends that
Yep.
have your interest. But I have some rankings here. We can pick them apart. I'll get your thoughts on overall on all these players. But this is how I have them ranked. Mets. Elijah Mitchell up at the top, 19 for 104 and a touchdown. Tony Jones. I thought he looked good, and he looked good in the
Hmm.
preseason, and I think that was part of why Lat was gone. 11 for 50, had a catch. Kenneth Gainwell, I thought, looked pretty decent. 9 for 37, 3 targets, 2 grabs, and 6 yards. He found the end zone, and he was playing in the 2-minute drill. He was
Hmm.
especially towards the end of the first. He was in there, and I think he got a play too on like 4th and 2, which he didn't convert. But it was interesting to see a rookie out there on a 4th down play going for it. Mark Ingram, like a massive day in terms of touches, not super efficient, but 26 carries among the leaders. Carlos Hyde was sprinkled in there yesterday, 9 for 44, caught a couple passes. Philip Lindsay finds the end zone as well. Actually, Ingram, Lindsay, and DJ found the end zone for Houston yesterday. That may be one of the biggest outlier games. James White, 4 for 12, not a whole lot on the ground, but he does have he did have 7 targets, 6 grabs for 49 yards. Damien Williams caught 4 passes on 5 targets. Larry Roundtree, I don't know, whatever, we can get into it, but 8 for 27. And then Cordell Patterson, we're really digging
Yeah.
deep here at the running back position. He ran the ball 7 times for 54 yards and caught 2 passes. I guess we can just start up at the top. Like, what do you think about
Yeah.
Mitchell? Is he your number 1 waiver wire priority out of these guys?
He is. We obviously, I don't think we've heard anything about the extent of Mostert's injury. My takeaway, like, I like Mostert a lot, high yards per carry guy, but he just hasn't seemed to stay healthy, unfortunately. So I think they were being a little more cautious because I think they were 38-10 when they actually ruled him out. So at that point, you're like, I don't need him right now. this San Francisco offense has always wanted to play a backfield too. Like think about the last 2-3 years. There's always been at least two backs involved. I assume Trey Sermon will get involved, but I don't think Elijah Mitchell's going away, especially given that camp that he had. So I think he is worth a stab. He looked really good. It was Detroit, but there will be cake matchups again. I mean, he obviously a 38-yard touchdown. He can rip off those big plays. That's all you really need in a flex spot. So if you're in a bind, I think Elijah Mitchell is a fine grab.
Yeah, I think Shanahan has been frustrating over the past couple of years with the multiple backs that you
Yeah.
talked about, but it's just so much upside inside this offense. A really good offensive line. They want to run the football, and to your point, I mean, he ripped off that big run, and he deserves touches. And then we heard after the game that Sermon just was outplayed in the
Yeah.
preseason by Mitchell and Michael Hasty was in there. I think he had a touchdown as well, and then Raheem Mostert, who I'm with you. I think is a really good back. It was I think a lot of us at FTN were in on him before the Sermon thing, and I
I
think a few
know.
of us came off of him when that news came because we realized he was going to be really chalky. But I mean, what can you do, right? The matchup was right, and the injury just happened. But Mitchell, I do believe, if you're in a fab sort of league, I think maybe 20%, 20
Yeah. I
bucks,
think I'm okay
depending
with
on
that.
your situation. I think if you need a running back, maybe you'd be a little bit more aggressive, Metz.
Yeah, I think actually in one league that I'm in with Fab, I lost J.K. Dobbins and then I lost Gus Edwards. So I am in a bind for an RB2, and that's when I'll probably spend 35% of my Fab on Elijah Mitchell just out of desperation. I don't want to start Sony Michel every week if Darrell Henderson's healthy. So I think in a situation like that, I think it's totally appropriate to go after him aggressively.
Yeah, I'm in a couple spots too where I'm just super thin all of a sudden at the running back
Yeah.
position, and it's just important to have some depth. Would you buy low on Sermon, or is this just it's going to be he's already behind the eight ball, he was inactive, but if we see that Mostert's out for a couple weeks and Sermon gets in there, and then all of a sudden he has a couple runs, he looks pretty good. I think that I would in a deeper league, but
Yeah.
I guess it all depends. It's all about context in your situation. Like right now, Mitchell deserves more touches, and heading
Yeah,
into week
100%.
2, he could be the starter for the Niners.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sermon is more of a long play, like you said, and I think if you're not only in a deeper league, if you're in a keeper league too, I think this could be a good buy low chance to snag someone like Trey Sermon, who maybe he doesn't come around till week 10 or 11 this year, but that could boost his stock for next year. You get him as a buy low keeper, so I think there are angles to take here. I just don't know if I'm confident in him having an immediate impact right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. In one of my 16-team dynasty leagues, I had J.K. Dobbins, who went down.
Yeah.
I had Zach Moss, who I wasn't excited about anyways, but people were just giving me lowball offers, and now like I'm seeing all kinds of offers come in this morning. And then I had Sermon, so it's like, holy
Oh.
crap! Like, who am I even going to start here this week in a 16-team dynasty? I picked up Carlos Hyde, and lucky I got a couple points out of him.
Yeah.
We could get to Hyde in a second, but I guess the big thing here, you see Mark Ingram, you see the 26 carries. He found the end zone, 85 yards. Philip Lindsay also found the end zone. David Johnson had a receiving touchdown. He finds the end zone. Houston rolls Jacksonville. That was a surprise for me. Not that I'm a big believer in the Jags, but I didn't think that Houston
It's
at
the
any moment
Texans, like, yeah.
would score that many points. Like, how could you expect that? What do you make of this backfield? Are you into Ingram because volume and opportunity is a big thing? Is this the outlier game? Are you letting other people go and grab Ingram? Like, what do you think?
I think it's kind of a combination between an outlier and potential upside. Because the thing is, I don't think Jacksonville. I don't think Houston is going to have many games like this where they're just controlling it from start to finish. But if they do, Mark Ingram's going to be that guy. I would have put a lot of money that I wouldn't see Mark Ingram have 25 plus carries in a game this year, and I would have lost that money really quickly. But if they're willing to give him work, like he's worth a stab. Like you can't really ignore 26 carries. That's a workhorse role. Like how many more guys? Like Joe Mixon and maybe might have been the only other guy this week that got that many touches. I don't think I'm prioritizing him as much as Tony Jones, Kenneth Gainwell, Elijah Mitchell. But there is merit here because if they do get out to a lead, he's going to be the one, touching the ball. I think if they're trailing, it'll be David Johnson in the passing game. But I can't knock someone for picking up Mark Ingram at all.
No, 26 carries was the second most yesterday. Mixon had 29, Damien Harris had 23, McCaffrey 21. In terms of touches, I mean, McCaffrey's a big player in the receiving game, so he finishes with second touches, but Ingram is right there. I agree with you. It's not a sexy pickup, but volume and opportunity is certainly king. And I mean, we can get into the midway point of the season with bye weeks and injuries, and just to plug somebody in as a flex guy that will probably get week in and week out at least 10 to 12 carries. And he did look like the goal line back, although Philip Lindsay did get a red zone rushing attempt, which he converted as well. Carlos Hyde, what do you make of Hyde? Is this the same thing? Depth? I'm a little concerned. I know it's just one game, but man, the Jags threw the ball a ton. And it looked like Robinson was that pass-catching running back,
Yeah.
and that Carlos Hyde was going to be the guy who just get the few carries. 9 for 44 isn't all that appealing, but this is another guy that I think, Metz just he shouldn't be on the waiver wire. I think, not a sexy pick, but somebody who can just maybe give you points if needed.
Yeah, I agree. And it was the Jacksonville game was frustrating because as soon as that Mostert news came out, I was like, you know what? Like, I have a ton of him. I'm going to pivot off a little bit. And I pivoted to James Robinson, who I thought his ownership would go down, and both busted. The concerning part of this backfield to me is that I don't think James Robinson allowed to touch until the second quarter. A little concerning. Might have been the game script. I don't know. But Carlos Hyde is clearly going to be involved, has a rapport with Urban Meyer, who people have their opinions on Urban Meyer as a coach, but he is familiar with Carlos Hyde, so I assume he's going to get some run. I think he'll be involved. And again, similar to Mark Ingram, I think it's impossible to ignore on the waiver wire. So if you whiff on, like your top two, Elijah Mitchell and Tony Jones, I'm fine going with Carlos Hyde.
Is there anybody else on this list, like a Gainwell, a James White, a Damien Harris? Do you care about Roundtree? Is there anybody on this list you want to?
I actually like Kenneth Gainwell quite a bit. That Philly offense, I mean, you can obviously speak to it. They looked really good with Jalen Hurts. And I think Jalen Hurts, the threat of him on the ground opens up a lot for Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, especially in the red zone and at the goal line. If yesterday is an indication, Gainwell very well may be the goal line back, and that carries value in fantasy football. So I think he had 10 plus touches. That's worthy of a flyer, in my opinion.
Yeah, for a rookie running back to get the 10 plus touches behind Miles Sanders was very telling. Yeah, I thought that they dominated the line of scrimmage. I was talking to Tino about this. I mean, part of it is the Falcons, just being as bad as they are, and the offensive line is absolutely atrocious. But I think the Eagles have their strength over the past few years has been the line of scrimmage. Like defensively, they can get pressure, and offensively, I mean, they were running screens and guys were blocking. And Jason Kelce is super underrated and still has a lot to offer. You're right. Jalen Hurts opened up a lot. He looked good. Obviously, he ran a bit. Again, he had 60-plus yards for the fourth time in 5 starts, and he just does to have a running back like that. And I think we'll see that when Fields gets in there every day. And I thought Montgomery looked good yesterday, but when he gets in there and some of these other running backs, Lamar Jackson, we have a long history of that, of just opening up holes and lanes for some of these running backs. But the offensive line played pretty strong. I agree with you. Gainwell, the fact that he was in the end of the second quarter, he was on the field and not Miles Sanders. Sanders caught a couple passes, but that was telling to me that he was on there in the 2-minute drill and he was looked at to catch balls, the 2-point combo, he was on the field, and going for it in Atlanta territory on 4th and 2nd. He was on the field too, which is pretty telling for a rookie. Metz, we'll take a quick break and we'll talk wide receivers. There's a few more appealing names here. I know we're digging deep here at running backs and we're talking about quote unquote journeymen who have been around for a little bit, but we'll dig a little bit deeper. There's a lot of just guys who could help you out in fantasy in terms of just wide receivers. So keep her locked. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. the Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney, Joe Metz here with you. Thanks for taking the time to hang out. We're talking waiver wires. We just went through the running backs. Again, if you have any questions for us, don't hesitate to ask. We'll circle back here if you were watching the video later on our YouTube page. And Metz has an article over at ftnfantasy.com, waiver wire targets like he will every week. And he's going to join me quite a bit here, and I'm happy to have him join me on Mondays to break things down in the NFL and talk about some wide receivers. So there's a couple on the top here, Metz, wide receiver rankings. I just basically looked across most sites and just tried to target guys that were owned in fewer than 50% of leagues. Now, I know a lot of people like Darnell Mooney and Sterling
Yep.
Shepard. This may surprise some people that I have them up at the top. These two may already be owned, but Mooney's hovering around that 50% mark, and then Shepard is sub 40. I don't know what the deal is. When he's healthy, he's good. Mooney, 7 targets, 7 targets, 5 catches, 26 yards. Now, not super appealing, but it's going to take some time. I think we'll see Fields before we know it. We saw a little bit of him last night, which was exciting.
Yeah.
Shepard, 9 targets, 7 grabs, over 100 yards. Tim Patrick is the big guy here. We'll get into him in a little bit with Judy going down. Devontae Parker, 7 targets, 4 grabs, 81 yards. We know Will Fuller will be back this week. Christian Kirk, a big game, plays 37 snaps, 70 yards, and 2 scores. Nelson Aguilar has 5 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. He had a big season last year with the Raiders. Terrace Marshall, 6 targets, 3 grabs, and 26 yards. Rondell Moore, I like him quite a bit. We can get into him a little bit later. He didn't play a ton of snaps, but when he was in there, he was used just like he was in a preseason. 5 targets, 4 grabs, 68 yards. KJ Osborne is somebody that I didn't think we'd talk about at all this season, but here we are. 67 snaps, played a lot of 3 wide receiver sets yesterday. 9 targets, 7 grabs, and 76 yards. And then Zach Pascal has 2 touchdowns on 4 grabs and 5 targets. He plays 69 snaps compared to Paris Campbell, 48 snaps. What stands out to you in this list, and where am I wrong? You can say it.
Yeah, I actually don't. So I didn't include in my waiver wire article, I go off of players under 50% in ESPN leagues. Darnell Mooney's above that, so I didn't include him, but I love the Darnell Mooney call, and I think obviously the Rams are arguably the best secondary in the NFL. So yeah, that working against him, and he will have an improvement in quarterback play at some point this year. So I think Darnell Mooney's stock is only going to go up. So I like that call quite a bit. I like Shepard as well. I mean, I don't know if I expect him to lead the team in targets every week with Kenny Golladay there, but like he and Daniel Jones have a legitimate rapport, and they've had it for 3 years now. He's going to get fed. And Tim Patrick is one of my favorites. Like Tim Patrick proved last year when he stepped in for Cortland Sutton that he can catch the ball. He's a very big home run threat in this offense, and I think we can both agree Teddy Bridgewater is probably a more reliable quarterback in this offense. So I like the Tim Patrick call a lot. Excuse me. The one that I'm just not sold on is Christian Kirk. This just feels like classic Christian Kirk. He'll do enough to get you excited, and then he'll just tail off. He didn't play a ton of snaps yesterday, played out of slot. And my concern is that if Rondell Moore's playing time goes up in the slot, it's going to come at the expense of Christian Kirk. It's speculation on my part. Christian Kirk has upside. I think anyone on the field in this offense has upside. There are just guys I would rather target. The other one that isn't included on here simply because he's not necessarily a wide receiver on every site is Juan Johnson. He still has wide receiver eligibility on some sites. I know Yahoo being one of them. New Orleans, I think it's very uncharacteristic to see 20 pass attempts out of Jameis Winston. They didn't need to pass the ball in that game, but Juwan Johnson, 50% target share. 2 of his 3 catches came as end zone target touchdowns. So 15% target share is fine. At a wasteland of a position, you'll take it. But if you're getting the high quality and high value targets that he is, he could be a startable and streamable tight end or wide receiver if you need one, if his role continues to grow. So I like Juwan Johnson quite a bit, and he's available. I've seen above 85% just about every website.
It's surprising because I feel like you and myself and Debro, there's a few of us, not that we have such a big say in the fantasy industry, but we've been talking about this guy quite a bit, actually, and from a DFS standpoint and preseason. I know Debro has really been on him as a Saints guy to break out inside this offense, and I agree. I like him, and when I gave you the list this morning, he was on there. He was number 10, and then I made some adjustments, and I took him off, but I do agree. I know Adam Troutman played a majority of the snaps, but I think that game was just an outlier, I think, all over the place. Like, Jameis, good for Jameis. I don't know how many games he's going to have 5 touchdowns and 0 picks and be that efficient throwing the football. And also, why I like Juwan is I don't think we know who the number 1 really is going to be inside this offense. while Michael Thomas is sidelined. Like Marcus Callaway had a really good rapport with him in the preseason, but he had to deal with Jair Alexander. And is Callaway gonna have to go up against top coverage week in and week out? If that's the case, he may just not be a part of the offense, and it could be an
Yeah.
opportunity for Juan Johnson, especially as you mentioned, end zone targets, which we love, and especially from tight ends. If these guys are gonna get 2 or 3 targets, it's not doesn't seem all that appealing. But if they're going to happen inside the red zone and the Saints are going to be an offense that scores, he's certainly should be on a lot of people's radars. And you're right, he's available across the board. I do agree with you when it comes to Kirk. I like the fact that he's linked to Kyler, and I think we can all agree.
Yeah, that's very true.
Is so fun, and he's gonna be right there MVP conversation. He has 5 total touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 4 through the air, and he could do that week in and week out. And I don't think any of us would be surprised. But you are spot on when it comes to the playing time for Christian Kirk, and drafting Rondale Moore is bad for Kirk because Kirk has had a role inside the slot, and I think it's only going to be a matter of time before Rondale Moore, I believe, who played 20 snaps yesterday, his playing time just increases, and the odd man out could be Kirk, or maybe it's just AJ Green. Like it's one of the two. Maybe AJ Green doesn't have anything to offer, and he just looks dust, and maybe Kirk has that role. But if you followed Kirk last year, very boomer bust. There were a couple
Yeah.
moments. There was, I think, a 3-week span. That's where he had maybe 5 touches, and he had 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, like that's kind of stuff that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I it's nothing against him as a player. It's just like there are so many mouths to feed in this offense, and that DeAndre Hopkins is going to get the lion's share. So he's fighting off, AJ Green, who, fantasy managers can think he's dust all they want, but all that matters is what the coaching staff in Arizona thinks, and they're playing him to the point where they don't think he is. So he has value. And it's going to be Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, and I think Chase Edmonds will obviously get in there for some targets as well. But a lot of mouths to feed in Arizona. But again, it's a very, very probably behind the Chiefs, I think you could argue the most fantasy-friendly offense in the NFL.
Absolutely. I mean, the defense played really good, but I still have a lot of questions when it comes to their secondary. But if they're going to generate pressure like that, I mean, quarterbacks.
Chandler Jones, holy cow!
How good was he? 5 sacks during the first quarter.
I know it was not. And J.J. Watt played really well too. I don't know what got in. I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't know what got into these two because they're very good players, but they looked revitalized. And if that defense somehow holds up to what they did in Week 1 all season, this could be a Super Bowl contender.
It's such a good division.
It's a stretch, but it's a really good division. It's a very good division, but it makes them a lot better.
I think we'll see. I think we could see as many as 3 teams make the playoffs from that division. Yeah,
That's crazy.
It's the tough. I think one of the toughest divisions in all of sports.
Oh, yeah.
Like not just football. Like there are 4
agreed.
really good squads there. And you're right. If they can generate the pressure and own the line of scrimmage, then maybe we won't see all the holes in that secondary. We'll see how that plays out. But you're right. J.J. Watt looked pretty good to start, and motivated in a new team, right?
Yeah.
I think he still has something to offer. AJ Green plays 54 snaps. Hopkins plays 60. Kirk plays 37, and Rondale Moore plays 20. KJ Osborne, is this one thing here? Like
I don't know.
I noticed Minnesota played a lot more 3 wide receiver sets than in years past. Maybe that's something to do with Irv Smith and then Conklin and just question marks at the tight end position. But 9 targets, 7 grabs, and 76 yards, and 67 snaps compared to like just Jefferson and Thielen just getting over 70. I mean, that's pretty telling.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what to make of what they're going to do in the passing game. We obviously know Adam Thielen is going to be the touchdown threat. Justin Jefferson is going to be the wide receiver 1, but Irv Smith obviously played tight end, but athletic ability-wise, profiled similarly to a wide receiver. That's why I think we saw Osborne slide in a bit more because they want the speed and athleticism. Again, this is similar to, like not player-wise, but similar to the situation where if you want to pick up Mark Ingram or Tony Jones or someone, if you are depleted at receiver already, I'm not going to fault you for picking up someone that had almost double digits in targets, 70-plus yards. That's very reliable production. So his rostership percentage is only going to go up. So at some point, like the best time to buy is Week 1 because you have so much time to cut him. So I think there's really no hurt here.
We got to get out of here, but I got some high upside guys there, and like Marshall and Moore. Like I could see these guys being ranked ahead of Aguilar and Kirk. Like if you are perfectly fine at the wide receiver position, like you said, and you don't need somebody to play right away, that you're just shooting for upside towards the later part of the season. I think both those guys could see their role grow. Van Jefferson shout out, Jalen Rager, KJ Hamler, Cedric Wilson. These guys
Yep.
shout outs. I mean, Michael Gallup is going to miss a few weeks, and looks like Dallas is just going to be past happy here moving forward. I was intrigued with Van Jefferson. I thought that was a strong game from him yesterday, and Matthew Stafford is going to look real nice in this Rams offense. Matt's always a pleasure, dude.
Yep.
Keep up the great work, and we'll catch up with you again, hopefully every other Monday, and we'll pick your brain. Check out Matt's article over at ftnfantasy.com. Any questions? Again, don't be afraid to hit him up on Twitter at jmets37 or 34, right?
34.
What's the meaning behind 34?
Everyone thinks it's Giannis. It's not. Do you remember Devin Harris?
Yes.
Yeah. So Devin Harris went to my high school, and I was like 1 year out of high school, and he was in high school, and I was like obsessed with him. So I made my Twitter around Devin Harris and just fits the mold of Giannis now. So it worked out.
It. Nice. I never would have thought that, actually.
I've been tagging the @Joe Metz handle for like 3 months now, and they just won't respond to me. So I don't think I'm going to be changing my handle anytime soon.
Always a pleasure, dude. Keep her locked. We'll talk about a few other highlights from week 1. Back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. A shout out to Joe Metz for stopping by and running through the waiver wire options this weekend. Van Jefferson is a guy that I kind of wish I put on that list as like number 10. I think there's a little bit more upside with him than Zach Pascal, even though Pascal had the 2 touchdowns. I really do feel like he could be something this season. What Jared Goff brought to them last year, I thought there was just limitations inside the offense, and you heard that from Sean McVay right away after the game, is that there's no limitations. There's not a throw that Matthew Stafford can't make, and I don't think that was a shot at Goff. Like, McVay's not just trying to pick on Goff. It's just he's excited, and you should be excited because he's excited, and he's just an awesome play caller, and Matthew Stafford is really good for this offense. So I think Van Jefferson should be on your radar in deeper leagues. So here are the rushing attempts leaders for week 1. We'll see if any of the, Tyson Williams or heck, if man, I don't even know if Josh Jacobs is going to play today. He's reportedly dealing with an illness. We'll see if any of these guys can get up there. But Mixon leads the way with 29 carries. He leads the way in touches as well. He had 172 yards, 127 yards on the ground. He had 4 targets. He played 54 snaps. Samaje Perine played 15. That was a great first game for Mixon. Volume is king, and it's everything in fantasy football, but he also has an upside to him as well. The offensive line, I thought, played pretty good for Cincinnati yesterday. Mixon is just like a good first game, and I wouldn't be shocked. We're going to do this every week with touches and targets leaders. We won't spend a lot of time on them. There are going to be studs. We're not just going to sit here and say, "Oh, Mixon and Henry, like these guys are good." Like we'll address it when it happens and see if there's any outliers on this list. But Mixon, don't be shocked if he's at the top or near the top week in and week out. Ingram, we already touched on that. I think it's an outlier game. I really do. Volume is everything in fantasy, but I wouldn't get super excited. I take some high upside guys in backfields ahead of him. Damien Harris, 23 carries. Man, he looked really strong yesterday. And my big takeaway is that, J.J. Taylor was inactive, and Ramondre Stevenson had 2 touches, and he fumbled on one of them. Now, Harris fumbled the ball at the end. It looked like he was going to be able to get in and seal that victory for Mac Jones and company. Unfortunately, he put the ball on the ground, but he caught a couple passes. He looked like a true bell cow back, and he looks good. He's going to be near the top here week in and week out as well. Antonio Gibson, 20 carries, 90 yards. I like the usage. His rushing prop total was 13.5, like his attempts. We smashed that over at ftnbets.com. I don't know if we'll get it that low again moving forward, but I love the usage that he had in that game. A couple of players that are not on this list, Naji Harris, a bit of an underwhelming performance for him. 19 carries is just tied for 12th with James Conner and Chris Carson, but he played 100% of the snaps, which is very rare for any running back in the NFL. It's usually only Christian McCaffrey, and then that's it. Dalvin Cook kind of flirts with that number, but the fact that he played 100% of the snaps is very telling on just the usage, and something we've talked a lot about on this show is a running back inside Mike Tomlin's offense is a guy who's going to, touch the ball maybe 20 plus times. He had some targets. Big Ben overthrew him a couple times. Big Ben does not look good. He just doesn't look like he's a capable quarterback in the NFL. But he could, be a little bit better next year or next week next year. Hopefully he's not around. Come on, like that's it. Like draft a quarterback, Pittsburgh. Um, he plays the Raiders next week, so we could see a little bit more of the offense just kind of click a little bit more than it did. A tough matchup in Buffalo. They won the game, but both defenses it was an offensive struggle on both sides. But Harris, I'd buy low. If there's anybody in the league that's just questioning about Harris, like, oh man, he didn't look good and he didn't do a whole lot. It's a matchup he thought he could, excel in because the Bills struggled last year, in open field tackles. But I think the big takeaway for me is that 100% of the snaps is super rare, especially for a rookie running back. And that's it. Javonte Williams, sell high maybe on Melvin Gordon. Williams has 14 carries. He closed out the game. Gordon had that big run. The rushing attempt prop for Williams was 6.5. I would take anything moving forward at 12.5, 13.5. He did look like it was basically a split. He had the edge, but he did look like the lead in that backfield. Maybe we can talk about that tomorrow with Tino because he was at that Giants game. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll talk wide receiver targets, a couple tight ends in there as well, a few takeaways when it comes to wideouts and the usage that they had in week 1. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here. Chris Meaney with you. Going to turn our attention to wide receiver / tight end target leaders. the top 10 here from week 1. And again, same sort of deal. You're not going to spend a lot of time on the studs. We'll just see, who had strong weeks, if they can continue that, if it's going to be an outlier. But up at the top, you see the 2 Dallas guys here, and Amari Cooper, 16, and CeeDee Lamb at 15. I think this is something that could continue week in and week out. Michael Gallup is going to miss 3 to 5 weeks due to a calf injury. The offensive line already has some holes in Dallas. I think that was part of the game plan in week 1 to throw the football and not run against the best rush defense in the NFL over the past couple of seasons. But it's looking like, CeeDee Lamb, where you got him in the middle of the second round, you got yourself a stud, and Amari Cooper, middle of the fourth, is complete value. Both of these guys will be ranked as top 10 wide receivers for me moving forward every single week. Hill, Diggs, Godwin, usual suspects that are going to be here. Keenan Allen, we smashed the over 5.5 grabs. You attack Washington in the slot. We got that one. DJ Chark, 12 targets here, and you see Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault are not on here, but Jones had 9 targets and Shenault had 9 targets. I think you could feel good about all 3 Jags wide receivers. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to throw the ball 50 plus times, but they got their butts kicked against the Houston Texans, so maybe they will throw the football 50 plus times. The offensive line is not great. They didn't really establish the run. I don't know if they're going to be able to establish the run if they're giving up a lot of points week in and week out. DJ Chark was second in week 1 in air yards behind Tyreek Hill. A solid first game from him. And then Marvin Jones finds the end zone. I don't want to toot my horn here, but my guys, Jones and Corey Davis and Smith, we got the catches and the yards, and they all found the end zone, and they were all undervalued in Vegas in week 1 in terms of props and in season-long drafts. Deebo Samuel, the big takeaway I think for me is that Brendan Ayuk I thought he was just injured and they were being cautious with him, but now reports out of San Fran talking about how he just didn't look great in the preseason. Maybe that had something to do with the injury, but he needs to carry himself more, I think, as a professional, was just kind of paraphrasing here the report from NBC Sports. But Deebo does seem like the clear-cut number 1 in this offense. You own him anyways. A couple guys that are deeper on this list that, you don't see on the board. DeAndre Swift, 11 targets, and then Jamal Williams, 9 targets. So 20 combined targets for both of these running backs. Now, they were playing from behind, but they will play from behind in Detroit quite often this season. TJ Hawkinson led the way with all tight ends in terms of targets. He's going to be in line for a boatload of volume this year, but I think my big takeaway from the Lions game is that Jamal Williams, if you were hesitant to start him, Swift, there were some question marks about health. He's good. You roll him out every week as an RB2. But Jamal Williams could be played as a flex play. He's going to be ranked as a borderline top 30 running back for me week in and week out. He saw touches inside the red zone, which he converted for a touchdown. But the fact that he had 9 targets and 8 grabs is very telling. And Jared Goff may just play check down all year. Like Hawkinson, Tyrell Williams going to face top coverage. Okay, maybe I'm not going to throw his way. Maybe I'm just going to dump it off to a couple of these running backs. So those are the 2 that stood out to me. And then KJ Osborne, we already talked about with 9 targets. I think he should certainly be on your radar. I got picks for tonight's game. One more segment here on Mean Streets. We'll continue things here on Game Plus Network. Keep her locked. back to Mean Streets here on Game of Plus Network. Tomorrow we'll talk trade targets, buy low, sell highs, and just my top 5 takeaways for the week. Here's a few picks here for this evening's game between the Raiders and the Ravens. I was on Las Vegas plus 5.5. You can get it now at plus 4.5. I don't know if they'll win the game here tonight, but I really like this team to compete here this evening. Baltimore has faced a lot of adversity over the past couple of weeks with just a lot of pieces falling, in their offense, and then losing Marcus Peters, a top corner here. I think Las Vegas keeps this game close. Allegiant Stadium is going to be absolutely bumping here. They played decent at home at times. Overall their record wasn't great, but they started really strong at home. They had an upset win against the Saints. I think Gus Bradley, bringing him in, is going to help this defense. There's a lot of holes. Now, he brought in a couple guys that he's familiar with, but I think he'll get them playing. Maybe not overall from start to finish, but I think here, week one, I think this is a good matchup. And Baltimore's going to run the football. I think we'll see a tight game here today. I like the over on a lot of these guys. Darren Waller, 6.5 grabs, 67.5 receiving yards. Man, he averaged 6.6 catches on 9 targets per game last year. He had 43 grabs in his final 5 games and 654 yards over that span, 130 per game. The offense runs through him. The Ravens allowed the 9th most catches to tight ends last season. You can get plus money at 6.5. Some books have 5.5, but it's juiced to the over. I like the plus money. I think he has 7 grabs here. Mark Andrews over 5 grabs. He topped 4 catches in 5 of his last 6 games. And there's really not a lot of pieces inside this offense. Marquise Brown over 48.5 receiving yards. That's part of it. Not a lot of pieces. Wide receivers dropping like flies here. And Raiders allowed they were top 10 in terms of yards allowed to wide receivers. At least 6 targets in 6 of his final 8 games, and he topped 5 in 5 of his final 8 games. So he's going to be a piece of this offense. And then Henry Ruggs is the one I think you may be like, no way. I mean, this guy didn't do anything last year. He started towards the end of the season, at least 3 grabs in 4 of his final 5 and 5 of his final 7. He just needs 3 catches here and 35 yards. I think they'll take a couple deep shots down the field with him. 17.4 ADOT was number 1 among wide receivers with 40 targets. They'll take some shots with him, and I mentioned Peters is not in this lineup. I think tonight's game will be pretty fun, and don't be surprised if the Raiders hang around with the Ravens. Enjoy the football game. Any questions? At Chris Meaney. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.